as a private citizen who loves this country. I've been asked to say a few words and then to pray, and we're going to do that. Last Saturday in Butler, Pennsylvania.
For decades, Franklin Graham has been one of the most recognizable figures in modern Christian ministry. As the son of the legendary evangelist Billy Graham, Franklin grew up in the shadow of a global religious icon whose sermons reached millions around the world. From an early age, it seemed as though his life would inevitably be connected to faith, leadership, and the enormous legacy left by his father. Yet the journey that eventually placed him at the center of international ministry was far from simple. Franklin Graham's early years were not always a picture of quiet devotion that many people might expect from the son of one of Christianity's most respected leaders. In his youth, he often spoke openly about struggling to find direction in life. While his father's reputation continued to grow through worldwide crusades and powerful sermons, Franklin himself went through a period of rebellion and personal searching. Eventually, however, he found his way back to the faith that had shaped his family for generations. Over time, he began taking on greater responsibilities within Christian organizations and humanitarian work. Eventually, he became the leader of Samaritan's Purse, a global relief group that provides disaster assistance, medical care, and humanitarian aid in some of the world's most difficult environments. Under his leadership, the organization expanded dramatically, delivering aid to communities facing war, natural disasters, and extreme poverty at the same time. Franklin also stepped into leadership role connected to his father's ministry. After the passing of Billy Graham in 2018, many people saw Franklin as a primary figure responsible for carrying forward the spiritual legacy that had influenced millions. Through the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, he continued organizing large-scale evangelistic events and preaching around the world. Despite the global attention surrounding his ministry, Franklin Graham has always emphasized that his greatest responsibility lies within his own family. Married for decades to his wife Jane, he raised several children while balancing the demanding responsibilities of leading international organizations. Friends and colleagues often describe him as someone deeply committed to family life, even while traveling extensively for his work. But like many families that live under the constant gaze of the public eye, the Graham family has also experienced moments of heartbreak and difficulty. In recent years, news shared by family members and close associates reminded followers that even families devoted to faith and service must face painful moments that test their strength. When heartbreaking updates emerge from a family connected to such a powerful legacy, the news often resonates deeply with supporters around the world. Many people who have followed Franklin Graham's work through churches, humanitarian projects, and evangelistic gatherings feel a personal connection to the Graham family. Their struggles and moments of grief are often met with prayers and messages of support from communities across many nations. Part of the reason these moments affect so many people is the profound influence the Graham name carries in Christian history. For generations, the ministry begun by Billy Graham brought messages of hope, redemption, and faith to audiences numbering in the millions. Franklin grew up watching those massive gatherings where people came together seeking spiritual guidance. The responsibility of continuing that mission has always been both an honor and a heavy burden. Within that responsibility lies the reality that leadership in ministry does not shield anyone from life's difficulties. Even those who spend their lives offering comfort to others must eventually face their own seasons of sorrow. When family members share emotional updates or speak about painful experiences, it reminds followers that spiritual leaders are also parents, spouses, and children navigating the same human struggles as everyone else. For Franklin Graham, maintaining strength during difficult moments has often meant leaning more deeply into faith and service. Throughout his career, he has frequently spoken about the importance of perseverance, especially during times when circumstances feel overwhelming. Whether responding to global disasters through humanitarian missions or addressing personal hardships, his messages consistently focus on resilience and trust in faith. The Graham family itself represents several generations of ministry and public service. Franklin's children have grown up witnessing both the privileges and challenges that come with such a legacy. Some have become involved in ministry work themselves, continuing the tradition of service that began long before they were born. Others have chosen different paths while still remaining connected to the family's spiritual heritage. Moments of heartbreaking news often lead people to reflect on the pressures placed upon families who live in the public eye. The expectations can be enormous. Supporters may view them as symbols of strength and inspiration, while critics sometimes watch closely for any sign of weakness. Balancing these expectations while dealing with deeply personal experiences can be incredibly difficult. Yet those who know Franklin Graham personally often say that his greatest strength lies in his ability to keep moving forward even during painful seasons. Throughout his life, he has traveled to conflict zones, disaster areas, and impoverished communities where suffering is a daily reality. Those experiences have shaped his perspective on hardship and strengthened his determination to help others as time continues to pass. The story of the Graham family remains closely tied to the larger narrative of modern evangelical history. The ministry that began with Billy Graham continues influencing communities around the world through preaching, humanitarian aid, and charitable programs. Franklin Graham's role in that story has been both challenging and deeply significant. When heartbreaking news emerges from a family with such a visible legacy, it reminds people that behind every public figure exists a deeply human story. Faith leaders, like everyone else, must navigate loss, uncertainty, and emotional pain. Their experiences often reveal the same vulnerability and resilience that define the lives of ordinary families everywhere. For many supporters, moments like these become opportunities for reflection and prayer. They serve as reminders that strength often emerges through adversity and that even the most influential figures must rely on faith, family, and community during life's most difficult chapters. In the end, the Graham family story is not defined solely by moments of sorrow but by the enduring mission that has guided them for generations. Through both triumph and heartbreak, they continue to carry forward a message of faith and compassion that has touched millions of lives around the world. For many years, the name Franklin Graham has been closely associated with faith, humanitarian work, and the powerful legacy left by his father, Billy Graham. The Graham family has long stood as one of the most recognized names in modern Christian ministry, influencing generations of believers through preaching, charitable work, and international outreach. Yet behind the public image of strength and leadership lies a family that, like all others, must face seasons of sorrow, uncertainty, and deeply personal challenges. The ministry that Franklin Graham inherited was not something that appeared overnight. His father spent decades traveling across continents, holding massive evangelistic gatherings where tens of thousands of people gathered to hear messages about faith and hope. Billy Graham's crusade became historic moments that shaped religious life in the 20th century. For Franklin, growing up in that environment meant witnessing both the power of his father's influence and the enormous expectations that came with carrying the family name. When Franklin eventually stepped into leadership roles within the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association and the humanitarian group Samaritan's Purse, he understood that he was continuing a mission that reached far beyond one individual. The work involved organizing large evangelistic events, responding to global disasters, and coordinating humanitarian aid in regions suffering from war, famine, and natural catastrophes. Over the years, Samaritan's Purse became known for delivering emergency relief in some of the world's most difficult situations. When hurricanes devastated communities, when earthquakes destroyed cities, or when wars displaced thousands of families, the organization often arrived with medical teams, food supplies, and shelter. Franklin Graham frequently traveled personally to many of these areas, meeting with victims and encouraging volunteers who worked tirelessly to provide assistance. Despite this global responsibility, Franklin Graham has often spoken about the importance of family as a foundation of his life. He and his wife Jane built their marriage over many decades while raising children who grew up surrounded by ministry work. Life in such a family is unique. The children of public religious leaders grow up knowing that their family name carries expectations, responsibilities, and constant public attention. As the years passed, several members of the Graham family began becoming more visible in ministry and public life themselves. Some followed paths connected to preaching, humanitarian work, or community outreach, continuing the tradition that began with Billy Graham many decades earlier. Others pursued different careers while still supporting the family's mission and charitable efforts. But even families built on strong faith are not immune to heartbreak. Over time, the Graham family experienced moments of personal difficulty that reminded supporters around the world that spiritual leaders also face painful realities. When news about challenges or loss becomes public, it often spreads quickly among followers who feel connected to the family's story. These moments can be especially emotional for people who have followed the Graham ministry for years. Many believers grew up listening to Billy Graham's sermons on television or attending crusades that filled stadiums with thousands of worshipers. For them, the Graham family represents more than a public ministry. It represents a personal spiritual memory tied to moments of inspiration and faith. When heartbreaking news is shared by members of such a well-known family, the reaction often includes an outpouring of prayers and messages of support from communities across the world. Churches, ministries, and individuals frequently express their concern and encouragement, reminding the family that they are not facing difficult moments alone. For Franklin Graham, moments of sorrow often deepen his reliance on the faith that has guided his entire life. Throughout his ministry, he has repeatedly emphasized that faith is most meaningful during life's most difficult seasons. It is easy, he often explains, to speak about hope during comfortable times. The true test of belief appears when grief, uncertainty, or hardship enters a family's life. In those moments, leaders who have spent years encouraging others must find strength within their own hearts. The responsibility can feel overwhelming, especially when millions of people look to them as examples of faith and perseverance. Yet those who know Franklin Graham personally say that he often responds to challenges by becoming even more committed to prayer, service, and helping others in need. The story of the Graham family is also closely tied to the history of modern evangelical outreach. Through decades of preaching, humanitarian missions, and charitable work, their influence has reached people across continents and cultures. From massive stadium gatherings to quiet relief efforts in disaster zones, the family's mission has focused on offering hope during times of despair. The center of this story is the understanding that public leadership does not erase personal struggles. Faith leaders may spend their lives guiding others through moments of loss or hardship, but they must still face those same realities within their own families. The emotional weight of such moments can be immense, particularly when they unfold under the watchful attention of the public. Yet history often shows that moments of heartbreak can also strengthen a family's determination to continue its mission. Supporters who witness such challenges often feel inspired by the resilience displayed during difficult times. The willingness to continue serving others despite personal pain becomes a powerful example of the faith being preached. For the Graham family, the future of their ministry continues to unfold as new generations step forward to carry part of the legacy. The work of Samaritan's Purse continues expanding, responding to crises around the world and delivering humanitarian aid to people who need it most. Evangelistic events organized by the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association still bring together communities seeking spiritual encouragement. Through every chapter of this long story, whether moments of triumph or seasons of sorrow, the family remained connected by a shared commitment to faith and service. Heartbreaking news may remind the world of their vulnerability, but it also reveals their humanity. In the end, the story of Franklin Graham and his family is not just about ministry leadership or global influence. It is also about the quiet strength required to endure life's most painful moments while continuing to serve others. Their journey reflects the reality that even those who inspire millions must walk through the same trials and emotions that shape every human life. And for the countless people who have been touched by the Graham family's message of hope, these moments become powerful reminders that faith is often revealed most clearly during the hardest chapters of the journey. As the story surrounding Franklin Graham and his family continues to unfold, many supporters around the world find themselves reflecting not only on recent heartbreaking news, but also on the long journey that brought the Graham family to this moment. Their story stretches across generations, connecting moments of extraordinary influence with deeply personal experiences that often remain hidden from the public eye. For much of the 20th century, the name Billy Graham represented one of the most powerful voices in global Christianity. His crusades filled stadiums, his sermons reached millions through television and radio, and world leaders often sought his counsel. Growing up as the son of such a towering figure meant that Franklin lived much of his early life under a unique kind of pressure. The world often expected him to eventually follow in his father's footsteps. Even before he had fully discovered his own path, Franklin himself has spoken openly about how challenging those early expectations could be. While the public often imagined a perfect minister's household, the reality of growing up in such a famous family included struggles with identity and purpose. Like many young people searching for direction, Franklin experienced periods of rebellion and uncertainty. It took time, personal reflection, and spiritual transformation before he fully embraced the role he would eventually play. When that transformation occurred, it reshaped the rest of his life. Over time, Franklin Graham became deeply involved in humanitarian missions and global ministry. Through the work of Samaritan's Purse, he helped organize relief efforts that delivered aid to victims of war, natural disasters, and poverty across multiple continents. Medical teams, emergency shelters, food supplies, and disaster response units became part of a massive network designed to respond quickly when tragedy struck communities. These efforts often brought Franklin face to face with people experiencing the worst moments of their lives. Earthquakes, hurricanes, refugee crises, and violent conflicts placed millions of individuals in desperate situations. For Franklin Graham, witnessing those tragedies reinforced his belief that ministry must involve both spiritual guidance and practical help. Faith, in his view, must also include compassion expressed through action. Yet even as he traveled across the world helping others through hardship, Franklin's own family faced moments that tested their emotional strength. The pressures of public life can be especially difficult for families connected to influential religious leaders. Every decision, every personal struggle, and every moment of grief can quickly become public discussion. When heartbreaking news emerges from a family so closely tied to faith and ministry, it often resonates deeply with supporters who have followed their journey for decades. Many people who attended Billy Graham crusades or supported humanitarian missions feel a strong emotional connection to the Graham family. They see them not only as leaders but also as fellow believers navigating the same uncertainties and challenges that every family eventually faces. For Franklin Graham, moments of personal difficulty often lead to deeper reflection on the purpose of his work. Throughout his ministry, he has emphasized that faith is not meant to shield people from suffering but to provide strength when suffering arrives. This message becomes especially powerful when leaders themselves must walk through the same painful experiences they have spent years helping others overcome. Friends and colleagues who work closely with Franklin often describe him as someone who responds to hardship with determination rather than retreat. Instead of withdrawing from responsibility during difficult seasons, he often continues focusing on the mission of helping others. That sense of commitment has become one of the defining characteristics of his leadership. Meanwhile, the broader legacy of the Graham family continues expanding through multiple generations. Some of Franklin's children and relatives have become involved in ministry work themselves, helping lead events, outreach programs, and charitable efforts connected to the family's mission. Their involvement suggests that the influence begun by Billy Graham will likely continue shaping faith communities for years to come. Still, the emotional reality of family life remains at the center of everything. Public recognition, global ministry, and humanitarian projects cannot erase the simple truth that every family eventually faces loss, fear, and heartbreak. In those moments, the values that have guided the Graham family for generations, faith, prayer, and unity, often become the source of strength that helps them move forward. The reaction from supporters during difficult times often reflects the enormous impact the Graham ministry has had around the world. Messages of encouragement, prayers, and expressions of gratitude frequently pour in from people whose lives were changed by the family's work. These responses reveal just how deeply connected many believers feel to the story of the Graham family. For observers looking at the larger picture, the journey of Franklin Graham represents a remarkable continuation of a historical legacy. Few families have shaped modern religious history in the way the Grahams have. From massive stadium crusade to disaster relief operations reaching remote villages, their influence has touched countless communities. Yet perhaps the most powerful part of their story lies not in the scale of their work but in the humanity behind it. Moments of heartbreaking news remind the world